Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of STOCAST. Today, I want to talk about gambling mechanics, loot boxes, promo choice packs, and all that kind of stuff. And I think the best place to start is to ask what value these products add to the game. Obviously, for the players, not for the company. We all know what the value is to the company for adding these things. It's to make more money. And they do that by taking advantage of people who have gambling problems. And we've talked about that before. That's not really the focus here. The focus is more practical today about how we can change these gambling products so that they're not such a problem. Obviously, one solution is to just remove them completely. But before we consider the idea that they should remove the gambling products entirely, and by the way, it's not like they're going to listen to this and take my advice. They're going to do whatever they think is the most profitable. The only way that gambling mechanics are going to be removed is likely due to legislation of some kind where they're just forced to do it and they don't have a choice in the matter. Like many vices in life, gambling isn't inherently dangerous exactly. Drinking alcohol is also bad for you, but not everyone becomes an alcoholic. That doesn't mean that alcohol should be outlawed. There are a lot of people who believe that. Smoking is obviously dangerous. The difference there is that it's external casualties. Smoke affects other people when you smoke. But I don't think that gambling necessarily has to be completely outlawed, but it does need to be heavily regulated. And I think that if gambling products are going to exist in games, they need to be designed in such a way that they are useful to the player base and not just to the company. And I think there are ways to do that. And what I'm going to say here in a second is going to probably elicit a very strong response, but I'd ask you to just bear with me for a moment. So I think the sensationalist part I'll get out front here. I think they should remove ships from lockboxes. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, if they remove the ships, then what's the point? And I would argue that contrary to what you might think, contrary to what the assumption is, the ships are the bathwater and the other stuff is the baby. And what really needs to happen in order to make lockboxes and promo items useful to the player base is to drastically reduce the disparity in value between the most valuable item you can get and the lowest value item that you can get. And part of that goes the other direction too. They need to remove all the filler and all the crap. So all of the bonus pools and all that kind of stuff needs to get removed as well. And so essentially what I'm thinking is that it sort of serves like a little mini expansion pack, right? So you keep all the other stuff. Maybe a new lockbox comes out, and what's included in it? Well, the only thing you can get in this lockbox is a console, some personal space traits, maybe a starship trait, and things like that, kit modules and those sorts of rewards. So they're all going to be roughly equal in value. Some are going to be more valuable than others. Obviously, some traits are highly desired, and they're going to be worth a lot more. But in general, that disparity is going to be in the order of like 4 or 5 times, right? So maybe the worst thing you can pull out of it is a kit module nobody wants. The best thing you can pull out of it is a desirable personal space trait. So maybe it's 10 times even. Maybe it's 10 times more valuable to get that than it is to get the kit module. And certainly we've seen a few outliers where it's significantly more than that, but that is on the player economy side. That's just supply and demand. Those Borg duty officers can be worth as much as a starship, but that's the exception, not the rule. So if you get rid of the ship, you take away that influence on the high end of the value table, and then you take out the filler garbage, you take away the influence on the average value from the bottom of the table as well. So now that the disparity between the stuff, the good stuff and the stuff that's less valuable is much, much smaller. And an analogy might be, how people complain about income inequality where, a CEO is making 300 times what the average employee makes. And the solution to that, or a popular solution to that, and I don't want to get too much into politics, although I do support it, is to say that the CEO can only make however many times what an average employee makes. You just cap that. You artificially say that, the disparity between the different employees can only be so much in terms of pay. A lot of people will disagree with that. That's not what the video is about. So, if you're vehemently disagree with that, then don't worry about it. I'm not trying to argue with anyone about it. It's not what this is about. But the point is, I think for lockboxes, that is the way to go because, and I know what other people are probably thinking right now is, why do that at all? Why do that at all? Don't do that. Just get rid of lockboxes. That's a half measure. Just get rid of them entirely. Don't even keep them in the game at all. But I would argue that there is some value to it because of the exchange. So, one solution that would be just fine for me personally, and I have to say that this advocacy that I'm putting out here now is really for other players. It's not for myself, right? So a solution that circumvents the loot boxes altogether would be to just release it as a C-store purchase, right? Here's the new, instead of calling it a lockbox, you just call it a little DLC or an expansion. You say, here's the Zot Vash, DLC, and maybe it's $10 or something, and you get everything that would normally be in the lockbox other than the ship and other than all the crap filler. You just get the sort of good stuff, right? The flavorful stuff, the kit modules and all that, right? And so I would buy that stuff. I think that would be a perfectly good way to do it. It would be a fair price, an upfront price. I mean, you guys might disagree. Maybe it should only cost $5 or whatever, but the point is it would be a fixed cost and you would get everything as an account unlock and you would get all the stuff. You'd get the console, you'd get the traits, you'd get all the stuff. And so it's, that's how purchasing should be, frankly. But the problem with that is that it creates a disparity between people who have money and free-to-play players. And of course, someone will say, well, you can always go on the Dilex and grind dilithium and sell it to other players, and then you can get the Zen and then use the Zen to buy the little expansion packs. And that's true, but you guys already know how I feel about that. I don't think that's a good use of people's time to sell their dilithium for Zen. Not that it's unstable, but it's only ever gotten worse all the time, and it'll probably only increasingly get worse. At some point, they may increase the cap. So instead of paying 500, dilithium for one Zen, people will be paying 800 or 1,000 or whatever. Are you still going to want to do it then? Or it may just get to the point where they don't increase it, but nobody puts Zen up anymore. People just get tired of putting their Zen up. They want the demand for dilithium is so great that in terms of the price that they just stop listing it. That's what happens on the exchange with a lot of very expensive ships. They go past the EC limit on the exchange, and then the only way you can find them is through private channels. Except there are no private channels for doing a dilithium exchange. It will only work on the dilithium exchange. So if we ever get to the point where the price per Zen for dilithium goes above the exchange rate, Cryptic's either going to have to raise it, which is going to be bad for everyone who uses it, or they're not going to raise it, and then people won't be able to buy Zen at all anymore. And the trend over time, like I said, has only been for Zen to get more expensive when buying it with dilithium, not cheaper. And it doesn't really do Cryptic any favors. They have made attempts. They have made genuine attempts to make some corrections to that by putting some DIL sinks in the game. It's not enough. And they're not really incentivized to do it in a way that is enough, because then it's going to cut into their profits. So I would not expect that to be a sustainable way to get Zen. EC, on the other hand, is something that you can grind out as much as you want. And we do need significant EC sinks in the game as well. This is a big, comprehensive issue that has to do with the economy in general in the game, not just with gambling. It touches on everything because everything is connected and related. And so changing one thing was also going to have implications for other parts of the economy. But if you add a significant EC sync to the game, because right now, other than buying things from other players, there is nothing significant to spend your EC on. If you decided, I'm never going to buy anything off the exchange, which is a perfectly reasonable strategy, I think, if you're a free-to-play player, what do you need EC for? I mean, honestly, what is there to spend it on? One tour of the galaxy or a couple of Endeavor rewards are going to give you more than enough to buy all of the consumables that you need. to repair your ship, or even the hangar pets are $25K. That's not very much. So there's nothing really to spend EC on. So it never really comes out of the economy. So prices just keep getting inflated more and more and more. But since the amount that you get from an Endeavor box or from a Tour of the Galaxy is fixed, that just means that you're getting diminishing returns on your labor if you're going out there and generating the EC. So if you're someone it's just like cryptocurrency. The people who mined Bitcoin back when it was new, it took very little effort for them to get one, and now it's worth a lot. And now the effort you have to put in, the electricity and computing power to get a new one, is much higher, even though each Bitcoin is worth the same amount. And so it's the same now. Anyone who's grinding out EC, as time goes on, you're getting less and less value for your time in terms of EC. So it is a significant problem that needs to be addressed. We need huge EC sinks in the game. We need huge dilithium sinks in the game. But going back to the point that this video is actually about, if you're a free-to-play player and you can get stuff from Lockboxes through the exchange. So the Lockbox system allows paid players to exchange their money for EC by opening lockboxes and selling the things in the lockboxes on the exchange, and it allows free players to get access to those items by grinding out EC and spending it on those items. The inflation problem is its own separate problem, but take a big step back and look at it abstractly, if from the very beginning, let's assume that from the very beginning, there were no lockboxes, and all of the personal space traits and consoles and all that stuff that have ever come out of a lockbox had always been part of a paid DLC, that would put a big divide between the paid players and the free-to-play players in a way that's just not really fair, to be honest. People complain about, paid advantage, people who pay money get an advantage. That's a huge advantage because a lot of that stuff is pretty good. When you're talking about, what is it that you're not allowed to get? What is the powerful stuff that you can't get as a free player? It's starship traits from ships, and it's personal space traits and consoles and starship traits from lockboxes. So in order for those things to be somewhat accessible to free players, having the ability for them to go onto the player market is an important aspect. Whereas if you convert it into a DLC system, which again would be fine for me, I would be perfectly happy with that in the same way that I'm happy with Mud's Market. Now, with Mud's Market, you can say the prices are too high, and that's a separate issue, right? Because the price can be adjusted. They're not going to, but they could, right? So when you complain about the price, that's its own separate issue. They can raise or lower the price. But the fact that Mud's Market gives you a straightforward price, they do have the weird discounting and all that, but at the end of the day, the very moment that you click the button, you have a price, and you know what it is, and you know what you're getting for your money. Lockboxes do not work that way. So if they added a DLC system to replace lockboxes, you could click the button, you're giving up 500 Zen, 1,000 Zen, 1,500 Zen, 2,000 Zen, whatever it is. Probably it will be more than people are happy with. And then you are going to get stuff, and you know exactly what you're going to get. That'd be great for me. I would just buy them every time they come out, and that would be perfectly fine for me. But the dilithium grinders would have a hard time keeping up because they couldn't just pick and choose. It would be all or nothing. If you only want the one trait, you still have to buy the whole pack. So, it's still difficult, right? It's hard to say. But the whole point of this, and I know I've been rambling a lot, is that lockboxes are not completely devoid of value. The real question is, how do we make them valuable for players? And I think so to wrap this up, you get rid of the stuff on the bottom end, all the filler, and you get rid of the ship on the high end. And you make it so the disparity between the rewards is only, a multiplier of 4 or 5 or maybe 10 instead of 100 or 1,000. And when you do it that way, then it discourages people with gambling problems from opening lockboxes, because they're never going to get a big prize, right? So it's sort of like when you gamble in real life. If you have the scratch tickets, some of them can get pretty big prizes, but there are some where the maximum prize is like, I don't know, $500 or something. I don't really gamble in real life. I have a grandfather who does, so I grew up watching him do scratch tickets and stuff. But I know that there are some of them where the maximum prize is much smaller, but your chances of getting any prize is much higher. So it's not uncommon to get a free ticket or $2 on a $1 ticket or whatever. So it needs to be more like that and less like, because right now it's more like the Powerball or whatever the equivalent is where you live, right? You pick your 5 numbers, your chances of winning are abysmal, and if you don't win, then you feel bad because the only thing you cared about was the grand prize. So it needs to be structured in a different way so that it always feels rewarding. And another thing they can do, if you're thinking, well, if there's no ship in there, the average value is going to come way down. Why would I still spend $1 or $1.25 on a key when the expected value is so much lower because the ship was removed? Well, you can compensate for that by increasing the amount of lobies. So instead of like 5 lobby guaranteed, you make it like 20 lobby guaranteed. So opening a lockbox always gives you 20 lobby. And then it gives you, one of the other prizes. And even if you get like the bad one, whatever that is, whatever the worst one is in that box, the disparity is still pretty small compared to the best thing. And so I think I've repeated myself way too much, and I'm going to go ahead and end this now because it's already over 16 minutes, going on 17 minutes. But yeah, so let me know what you guys think. I'm sure this is a big topic. I'm probably going to come back to it again because there's just so much to talk about. But with the recent gambling warning I started putting in some of my videos, I thought it was a pretty topical thing to talk about. And I'd love to get your guys' opinion. Do you like my ideas for revamping the lockbox system? Would you rather see a DLC style system where you're unlocking it from the C-store? Would you rather see them just remove all that completely and focus on doing more story content or paid story content or whatever, talking about big changes that could happen to the game? So I'll see you guys next time. Have a great day. Bye.